Our next speakers are Neil Rebeugeot and Rebecca Goldberg from Arup, and they're going to be looking at managing change and the importance of core values in property and business. Neil is a director of Arup, leads the property team, but I think many of us will know of his time with Goldman and Barclays, so great to have the client side view and a consultant side view as well, which you are now, of course, from Rebecca, who is a member of the People and Change team in Arup Consulting. Just to remind you that any of the speakers that give us permission, we will share the slides with you following the talk. So that will be really excellent for you to carry on learning. So thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rebecca Goldberg from Arup. I lead our workplace vision and change team. And we're here today to talk to you about change and core values. So to ask some of the bigger questions, like what are your core values? What are those of your job and your organisation? And how should workplace reflect core values? So today's my first time presenting at Workplace Trends, but I'm joined by Neil, who was here right at the inaugural event all those years ago.
Great, thanks. So I'm Neil Rebeugeot, and 17 years ago I had a full head of hair and looked much better than I did today. I think you obviously saw me. So yes, I was at that point at Goldman Sachs, and at that time we were in the height of driving out through all of Europe, and obviously in the UK we were building out more of Peterborough Court and all the other places around London that we were very much enjoying the growth. And at that time, I was here at the time with the rest of the team to talk about workplace evolution. What did that really mean? And at that time, if we go back on the JLL presentation this morning, it spoke about where were we, and at that time, on the timeline, we were at that point, we were right on the cusp of technology, and we were getting rid of those big CPUs that were in the corner of that desk, and we were going linear desking. We were bringing all the office from outside and one-to-one desking to all that sort of stuff was bringing it inboard. We were also trying to be a little bit more global in our thinking, and that was really, really important. And I think for me, just thinking about where we were trying to get to, it was around global standards at that time. But today, I'm at Arup, and I've spent a number of years at Goldman's and then at Barclays, also doing global standards. But today I'm now at Arup, where we're driving the property business, and that's kind of a reason. It was a bit of a lifestyle choice, but also more importantly, I could see where the market was moving. We were thinking more intelligently about people, thinking about process, thinking about assets, and obviously technology had a major impact on where clients and customers were looking to go. I'll do the clicking, thank you. So, core values, are they important? Well, they are important because strategy drives the how and the values drive the why. And for me, I think incredibly, companies are now starting to align their values with their organisation as they start to evolve, which is great. You do wonder sometimes how many of those are truly doing it for the right reasons, and now some of them are actually trying to be driven to do it because they know the only way to do this is actually to survive. And we're seeing many organisations that have maybe lost touch with their organisation, lost touch with what their customers want to do, and you're starting to see some of these big names which are starting to disappear. Studies indicate that mission-driven organisations who have really good values, without a doubt, drive true innovation, retention of great staff, and also people are now, in terms of having preference, they're actually wanting to stay with certain organisations because it's the right thing to do. But you're also starting to see, or people also starting to move away because they're not feeling it's the right thing. But why is that? Well, I think we're starting to see, particularly with the generations, and we're seeing young people and older people who are now converged in terms of this workplace and how we engage with each other, we're starting to find that there's more distrust than ever before. We've already heard in presentations already where people are starting to rise up and getting really frustrated about how things are being done. Those things that we've trusted for all these years are not necessarily being true, maybe in business, maybe in media, maybe in other different types of how we're working and how we're living. And things have got to change, and I think it's really important that organisations have to start to think about who they're working with and what they're doing. It is without a doubt the importance of values is really important, because as we start to change in the environment and start to change as a business, we have to make sure that the North Star, the behavioural compass, is switched on all the time. Because as we start to be battered, as we go through change, as most of us will know, when we go through a project or an organisation just goes through doing what they're doing, it's not a straight line. It's a very tortuous route, and things are very challenging. And I think it's really important that we need to make sure that we have our compass, our radar on, and we've got to make sure we have robust values that are linked to the business. So, we've probably seen all this before, but I just thought I'd just think about it just for a moment, particularly as I have teenagers as well, and they have to tell me what they think of me versus where they are. But the values need to be real. They need to be authentic. Therefore, despite the journey or the extreme factors, we need to make sure we're robust. And we also need to make sure that what we're doing is doing it in the right way. So when we think about some of these organisations, I think we're converging. Google. I went in there to see, well, what does Google think about some of these generations? They're saying, the traditionalists might be silent. They're saying the baby boomers might be conservative. The poor Generation X are being ignored. And then we've got the millennials being aligned with values, but particularly obsessed with food. And I feel very sorry for the Generation Z, because they're screwed. So I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen to those poor guys and girls. But the point is, when you think about these types of generations, I think absolutely, they all come with their own events that have happened in their lives. But actually, it brings a rich tapestry. The problem is, we're often not asking them what we're doing. We're often focusing at some of the managerial levels. We're often focusing at maybe just focusing on worrying about the next generation that's coming through. The only way to make this a really rich tapestry and to really get the true DNA of the organisation, we have to make sure that we are bringing them all on the journey. Thinking about workplace trends. So people are at the heart of what we do and everything we do. When we think about space, technology, ways of working, these are the things we should be doing all the way through. And I think these are very much standard things. But the question is, how much time are we taking to ask? How much time are we taking at the right time to think about what we're doing with our future projects? What do we think? How does it align to the business? And it's really interesting when you think about the 4 areas that we consider talking to our clients and our customers, defining, developing, implementing and operating. We often find that many organisations, at the point of implementing, is the point that they're going out and asking. I like to think that more now, we're starting to find that people are spending more time thinking about defining and engaging more and a broader set of the organisation. And that is a really important thing that we need to try to do. So Rebecca's now just going to share with us now a little bit more information around the different types of organisations, the good, the bad and the ugly, in terms of what she's seen in those 4 different areas. Thanks.
Okay. So our very first stage, we're defining our projects, but a word of warning. So values, as Neil said, values will only work to underpin your projects if they're authentic. They need to be brought in at every level of the organisation, and particularly by the leadership. Because if they're not, cultural dissonance will occur. Credibility will be undermined, and any change efforts that you're making will be, seriously rolled back. Living by your values is not easy. So be prepared to make tough decisions. Be prepared to walk the talk. So I'm wondering how many people in the room have been involved in projects that are billed as a kind of future new world of great collaboration, agility, flexibility, but scratch the surface and they're really about cost and efficiency. I'm seeing a few nodding heads. So there's nothing wrong with pursuing cost and efficiency, but all I would argue is, or urge, is that first of all, check the no unintended consequences like poor productivity or disengagement. But secondly, be honest. I think end users really appreciate that. So and just make the link, connect back to the company's raison d'etre. When companies make false claims, that misalignment becomes obvious. It comes out, and We've been working with a transport organisation, and their top team were absolutely insistent that they were committed to sustainability goals. However, when we asked them to invest 100 fake dollars in their priorities, just $3 was left for the sustainability plot. So kind of called them out. I want to share with you our own project. So it's not perfect. This is 80 Charlotte Street. It's just around the corner. It's the Arup offices there. The design is underway. We are trying to do the right thing, and I'll let you know in a year or two whether we've succeeded. So we've engaged really widely. We've had quite a few surprises along the way and had to make some tough decisions. Sustainability is no surprise. It's been mentioned a lot today, and we're very committed to low carbon operation in the building. Collaboration. So this was one of the 6 values noted by our founder of Arup in his key speech written in 1970. It's just as relevant today for us to be competitive. So as a result of that, we're looking at how we organise ourselves on the floor plates. We're punching through the floor plates to increase collaboration. Again, another thing that we've seen quite a lot today. And then health and well-being. So we're increasing the amount of fresh air on the floors. But one of the things that we're doing is, and through our engagement that came out that surprised me, was really the importance of food to all our staff. It really came through very strongly, not just nutritional well-being, but also for social cohesion. I think Killian mentioned it was a magic glue for social connectedness. So one of the things we're doing is we're actually increasing our fresh food preparation area in the building, and given this is a central London location, that might be quite surprising. So moving on to developing your design. As Neil said, every project is going to hit some kind of block at some point, a crunch point that requires some difficult decision making. And this is where values really help. Values can go from being, some fluffy words dreamt up in a strategy meeting to real tools that you can use to support and make the right decisions. This is One Triton Place. It's recently topped out. And what I like about this is the whole team was focused on circular design principles. It's a refurb project, so there was no kind of silver bullet to meet their goals. But by working together, they identified marginal gains to make it an exemplar for sustainability. So living our values isn't just evident in our final product, but actually how we go about implementing our projects. So some of the organisations we're working with are using the project as an opportunity to extend employment opportunities, perhaps to apprentices, to refugees, to demonstrate their commitment to local community, to social inclusion as well. In my view, actions speak a lot louder than words. And by contrast, as one organisation decided, in response to concerns about their staff not really knowing what the core values were, they decided to print their values on a placard, put them in every meeting room throughout the business. Now, those values are not lived, they're printed, and they had the really unfortunate consequence of creating a shortage of acrylic in the marketplace. So thinking about implementing, bringing people along with the change. So successful change is really built on it's as much about reinforcing and reassuring people about what's going to stay the same as it is about introducing what's new. This is where values can really support. So values tend not to change, they are constant, and they can really help with that continuity. This is the David Attenborough building in Cambridge, where there's 500 academics and conservation experts all working together to a common goal. And I think what I like about this building is that it really speaks, the brand, the identity, it helps align people. It's increasingly important for staff and employees as they come less frequently into their place of work that they get a really healthy dose of purpose and mission. And I really like the example earlier, the IOC building, just how it did that. So final stage, operation. Last but certainly not least, operation, when our workplaces are finally delivered. This is where we really accrue the benefits of all that thinking. But unfortunately, this is the point where most of us walk away, and workplaces are just left to very slowly erode over time. What we need is adaptable workplaces that respond and are maintained and kept up to date, actively curated, if you like. You might be wondering why I've put an aeroplane up there. I really wanted to just raise this recent phenomenon of flight shaming, which is the anti-flying movement that's come out of Sweden. So it's having really very real impact. So the Swedish air traffic has actually decreased by 8% in just 4 months this year. It's the Greta Thunberg effect, some say. The reason I'm bringing it up, because although values don't, they tend to stay constant, I think our interpretation of them may change. And we're seeing in our organisation, and I'm hearing this from others, that some of our staff are really questioning the need for air travel. I don't know if that's applies to anyone here in the audience. I'm raising it because I think it's going to potentially raise some very big questions. It's where our intrinsic values kind of bump up against what does the organisation believe. So I'm just going to put that out there. And our final example, again in operation and sort of echoing some of the things which you raised, Oliver. So this was a well-being project with a financial institution that's very committed to sustainable investments. What we did is we correlated a lot of empirical data, sensor data that relates to well-being with the perception, just as you mentioned, Ed. So it's the perception of well-being data from surveys, from observations, and so on. And on the back of that, we were able to make a number of recommendations. The reason I brought it up is I think the project was a real success because not only because the CEO was very actively involved, but because it really chimed with the ethos of the organisation. Staff were really encouraged to come along, hear the results, but not just hear the results, actually get involved, because whilst we were able to make some technical recommendations, actually the real things that made a difference were dependent on behaviour change and compromise, notoriously difficult. So I just think that kind of connection to values was a real success factor here. I'm just going to hand back to Neil.
Yeah, so in closing, really, I guess my question to you is, so are core values important to businesses with whatever they're doing, whether they're doing their projects or whatever they might be doing in change projects? And we think it really is. We without a doubt, storms come and go, might be natural. We have events that are occurring around the world, sometimes financial. We're finding that technology is changing, but more importantly, people are starting to demand more. They want more from organisations, and they expect better moral standings for organisations and how we do business. So I think as we all engage with our clients, and some might be clients and some might be advising clients, I challenge us all to really try to challenge our clients to do the right thing so we get the best outcome. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Who decides what the core values are?
Oh, well.
And then the follow-up question, who is the guardian of the core values?
Yes, so what I would say is if, on a workplace project, if you're coming to an organisation that doesn't have very explicit core values, then I would say the workplace project is not the place to start. It's really reflecting what is already existing and making sure that carries through. Because it's not it's not something that you can do overnight. It's a very big endeavour to adopt and adhere to core values for an organisation.
And who's the guardian of the values?
Who's the guardian? I think that's a really good question. I'm thinking about our organisation. We've got a few individuals who I guess are the guardian, but really they need to be lived throughout. It's part of what attracts people to the organisation as well. So it has some longevity and continues.
In most cases, you often find that the board holds those, and they should be testing those. In organisations I've worked within, when they go out to their staff and when they're engaging with staff, most of the time they are testing that those continue to be robust. you will find certain organisations slightly tweak them along the way as the world changes and becomes more relevant. You know, things have to become a little bit more relevant because things change. But you'd like to think it should be from top down, they should be tested all the way through. And that's where I've seen most of the time those things are tested. And certainly for Arup, I think we've got we know it as the key speech. Those things are there, and some things are slightly outdated, but those are cross-checked with the organisation, so they become alive all the time.
Okay, I'm going to act like the reporters. It's like a two-part question that are unrelated. The one question I have, the first part, is what happens to core values when you're in an economic downturn? Do you find that they remain constant or just fall off the cliff? That's the first part of the question. And then what happens to core values when you have mergers and acquisitions? So you've got two different companies coming together. How have you found that works?
Should I do the second one first?
Okay.
Which is, you take the first one. I was involved in a number of organisations where they've done an M&A situation. It is difficult, and you often find that the identity of whatever organisation, they smash together, and it's very, very difficult. In most cases, I think good organisations take time and try to pull out the benefits of both organisations to be able to reflect a new emerging organisation. For something like, I'll use Barclays, they weren't going to use the Lehman's brand anymore. They just bought the business, and so therefore, in that case, the dominant organisation continued with their pure brand, but they had spent a lot of time and effort of ensuring those who came from the other side of the business truly understood the brand, and they were taken on a number of sort of immersed into the organisation. But most importantly, key individuals within the Lehman Brothers organisations were put on the board and other parts of the organisation. So although they didn't take their values, they made sure they understood the Barclays values, but more importantly, they did not feel like, well, you're just going to come and work for us and you slip underneath us. They were merged, and that became a strong organisation. So I hope that answers those two situations.
Yeah, on the first question, what happens in an economic downturn, I think that's a really interesting point. I think adhering to your values doesn't always have to cost money, but sometimes it does, and particularly in a workplace environment. And all I would say is that there's an obligation to just be very honest about what your choices are, and that transparency goes an awful long way. I think people are in it together and they feel like they've been included. So, but just presenting something as a fait accompli and cutting stuff isn't going to go down well. So
I guess the worst thing you can do is do something in the name of the values. And they, name it a particular thing, but actually they have an undertone of something else. And when that does get discovered, and I've seen organisations that have done that, it devalues the brand, and it takes a long time to come back from it. So you just need to be very careful. A bit like the word around the guardianship, you need to make sure there needs to be an independent review of those values to ensure that you're not using them in vain. It's very, very difficult if you make the wrong decision, and I've seen that.
Any other questions from the floor? One over there, thank you.
You started off by talking about core values, and that seemed to come out as a list of practical physical things, which I guess is your focus. Do you find that once you've implemented those ideas, that the organisation itself is in need of remedial therapy or something? That, in other words, to change the behaviours, there's a different set of values, or maybe it's the same values, need implementing not in the physical provision, but in the method of organisation.
I think behaviour change is an awful lot easier if you are aligned with the values that already exist in the organisation that people have already bought into. So I think change would be faster and easier if you can demonstrate what the connection is back to the kind of life force of that organisation. And when you're going against that, that's when it's hard to get people to change their behaviour. But in terms of remedial, I don't think, I think for us as professionals really to reflect and respond to really the kind of honest core values that there are there. I hope that answers your question.
I guess just to pick up on that a little bit as well, also sometimes organisations try to reinvigor their core values, maybe through a flagship, new HQ, all those sorts of things. And that's great for where they're doing what they're doing it. And we've seen a number of big organisations in London recently relocate, and those values have been manifested in particular look and feel and certain environments to encourage those collaboration or things they want to do, or drive more transparency of how they do business. But meanwhile, they're in maybe 30, 40 other locations around the world, and that's a little bit more difficult. And it's really important that if you really want to drive those values through an organisation, you need to be ready to ensure those themes are enabled to be pushed through the organisation. So it shouldn't be just doing in one location. You've got to make sure those are truly livable and appropriate for the different cultures they might be traversing into.
Thank you very much for your time.